All right, sounds good. So let's talk about testosterone, um, and kind of its role in the body, what it is, and a couple things related to that. So testosterone is a anabolic androgenic steroid. You may see other steroids referred to AAS, which is that abbreviation, anabolic androgenic steroid or androgenic anabolic steroid. Um, Steroid, I think, kind of is a synonymous term. It's a little ambiguous. At least, when we think the term steroids, I know, between you and me, we're probably thinking of, anabolic steroids,
Correct.
but there's all types of steroids, and steroid in chemistry just refers to a chemical structure. Okay. So the chemical structure is going to be some carbon rings, three hexagonal carbon rings and one pentagonal carbon ring. Okay. That's going to make up testosterone. And that's going to make up all steroids. They all have that same structure. Okay.
Right.
And that's really what, is the defining thing. Now they have different attachments on that structure that make it different. But, just to give you kind of an idea, um, vitamin D is a steroid, cholesterol is a steroid, cortisol is a steroid, aldosterone or aldosterone is a steroid, estrogen is a steroid. These are all steroid hormones, okay? Progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, they're all steroids, okay? They do different things and they have
Right.
different attachments at different spots in their body, but that basically was what defines a steroid. Testosterone is a man's main anabolic androgenic steroid, okay? Anabolic in terms of testosterone is going to be referring to uh, protein synthesis. Okay. So building proteins, putting them together, and we will define that essentially in this aspect as building muscle. Okay. Or
Right.
building tissue in general. Okay.
Right.
That's what protein synthesis does. Testosterone accelerates the rate of which protein synthesis happens. That's the anabolic portion of testosterone. Okay. And the androgenic portion of testosterone is going to be the things that make you a man: deepening of your voice, facial hair, um, you name it. Anything that makes you a man, that's the androgenic side of it. And that's kind of in, let's just, I know we talk about TRT a lot, but I'm just going to kind of loosely define here. That's sort of been the Shangri-La of like bodybuilding, for example,
Right.
to
Right.
chase the anabolic portion without having too much androgenicity added in. Okay. So there is a balance between the two. Um, Certain steroids have an association between their anabolic properties and their androgenic properties. Testosterone is 1 to 1. Okay.
Okay.
So one part anabolic, one part androgenic. So, it's important to have testosterone in the body. We know it's a steroid hormone. We know it's anabolic. We know it's androgenic. We know the ratio between the two is 1 to 1. What does it do? Well, it builds protein. That's one. It increases erythropoiesis or red blood cell production. It does that. It gets converted to estrogen. It also gets converted to DHT. Okay. So testosterone has multiple roles in the body. It's also, a precursor for nitric oxide. You need good testosterone levels to have nitric oxide production.
Right.
Nitric oxide is going to help blood flow. This is going to help guys with their erectile quality. There's certainly other things that take into play for that. We're just sort of talking about one little facet of that, but that's pretty much it when it comes to testosterone. So, um, it's a very, very important hormone. I think it's kind of bastardized in a way.
Right.
We hear, all the stigma associated with it in
Correct.
terms of um everybody's, all this, that, and the other, and unfortunately bodybuilding's kind of taken over, so it's got a bad rap. But I use the equation too. Everything used appropriately is probably fine, right? Even things that maybe aren't super appropriate, like if you go to the bar and you have a beer, it's fine, right?
Right.
Probably no issues, right? If you go to
Right.
the bar and have 10 beers,
Yeah.
probably not fine.
They're going to have some issues. Correct.
So
Yeah.
exactly, right? So, and that's kind of the same principle that we're applying here. We're going to go have a beer, and dose testosterone appropriately. So
Right. So, you know what, Josh, I guess the big thing with, especially now with TRT, is why is it so widespread, the amount of men with low testosterone?
It's a great question. I don't think that has one specific answer personally.
Right,
Um, if we go back to when we started to take testosterone values roughly, at least how we determine the ranges, there's been a couple different studies on the ranges throughout the years. The most recent one, I think, was in 2009. And
right.
that's kind of how we get the range, the testosterone range. When you see on your lab, like, hey, it's 250 to 1100 or whatever. They all come from these studies that they've done. And what they do is they take them and they kind of add the new study to the older studies and then kind of re-roll the data around,
Okay.
and then it spits out like a new average. So it's not like we've taken people over the past 10 years and like say, hey, this is our average. Like, because if we did that, honestly, I probably think it'd be a little bit lower than what it is. I think the
Right,
older values are sort of propping up the newer ones a little bit, in terms of their values. But I don't have a good example as to why guys nowadays have lower testosterone, en masse. There's a couple ideas. One could be some microplastics, and chemical exposures that we are kind of exposed to now, more
right,
so than we probably have been in human history. Okay. Two, we're living longer, right? So think of it this way. We've only really pushed the human lifespan to what we have been able to do in the past 100 years or so, right? Pretty much since the advent of antibiotics.
right,
If you go back 100 years, I think the average life expectancy for somebody in the 1920s, I think, was like early 50s.
right,
The average life expectancy for a man in the United States now is 79. At least
right,
it was before COVID. So, but if you take that out of it, it was 79. Okay.
right,
Women is 81. Um, so what's happening now is we're living longer lives, and we're not just living longer, but we're living quality wise longer, right?
right, right.
It's not uncommon to see a guy in his 60s or 70s, still very active, and
Yeah,
you may not even know he's in his 60s or 70s, right?
right,
Um, so we're kind of pushing that envelope in terms of the age and activity level that we have for guys. So what's happening is that from an evolutionary standpoint, I mean, you go back 200 years, if you made it to 40, you were lucky to be alive,
right.
right? And
Yeah,
if you go back another 100 years prior to that, I mean, if you made it to 30, you were probably, so each thing, it's basically when you hit 40, your biological clock, and in terms of what you've been able to do, was like, we've kind of hit our limit, you
right.
know and that's kind of when we see most guys that are on testosterone. That happens at different ages, I'd say,
Yeah,
on the majority of which are definitely going to be in their late 30s to early 50s, right? That's kind
right.
of the sweet spot. So all of the 40s. It can be earlier in some folks, it can be later in some folks, but in general, that's kind of the range that we're kind of finding. And that's just because the Leydig cells, they don't really quit per se. They still make testosterone, but the efficiency level of what they make testosterone drops off dramatically as
Right.
you age. And sometimes it drops off quite dramatically a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And the only way to fix that is to get testosterone supplementation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's obviously becoming more popular, obviously. Clinics are popping up, it seems like every day. Um,
Yeah.
so obviously if more clinics are popping up, one would think there's money involved, and that means there's more people.
Yeah.
So and it's becoming more mainstream. You definitely hear about it more and more now. So I mean, I guess it's been like I look back at like my grandfather and my dad, and I could think of them when they were in their 50s, and and my grandfather in his 60s and 70s, and that's not that long ago. You're talking two generations, and
Right.
they seemed a lot different than men in their 50s and 60s today.
Sure.
Um,
Oh, for sure.
you know what I mean? And it's like that's a quick drop of testosterone, in a short amount of time.
It
Um,
is.
so, I mean, is it in, I mean, I don't know what the answer, I don't know if anyone knows what
Right.
the answer
I
is.
think I think there's too many variables to kind of just say
Right.
this
But
is it.
there's definitely something. there's
Yep.
something up for sure, you know. Like, I mean, at your clinic, do you see an uptick in in people? And the real question is, do you see an uptick in younger guys that are coming in with testosterone issues?
Yeah, yeah, we definitely see. I mean, I would say the vast majority are still that age range that I was quoting earlier, so like mid to late 30s and older. But if we're going to define a younger guy, we'll just say he's in his 20s or early 30s, right? Um, I think a lot of guys in that age range are probably okay in terms of their testosterone values. Um, and I'm not saying everyone is, but I mean, because there's certain genetic conditions like Klinefelter's, which is two X chromosomes and one Y chromosome, or mosaicism, which is kind of some variants of that you'll be pretty much hypogonadal the whole time. Like you'll make
Right,
almost no testosterone at all.
right,
So those guys 100%. And then you have your other people that, I have a client that had lymphoma as a child and they had to give him chemo and it destroyed his testicles. So he's
gee,
on testosterone, right? I've had another client that's had testicular cancer. So he had an orchiectomy as one testicle. So his one testicle wasn't able to keep up with production, probably because he also had chemo, following the orchiectomy. It just depends on the type of cancer that you have. If you're going to get chemo radiation along with it. So on testosterone replacement therapy. But for the vast majority, I would say of younger guys, I wouldn't say that their testosterone I would say is low enough to necessarily warrant replacement, but I think the awareness is there because of social media
right,
and everything. And now, I think the major problem is probably social media and lifestyle,
right,
right? Like if you go back to like you said, your grandfather, they were like different guys. They didn't have the distractions and I mean, we're sitting here on a podcast and like they're
right,
probably like, didn't even talk on the telephone.
right, exactly,
So like I think the types of distractions and the type of life was a little slower paced and the
right,
flow of information was definitely a lot slower back then. And
right.
not complaining, I think that's probably awesome. I'd
Yeah,
love to live in an
no, for
environment
sure.
like that because
Yep,
it's insane, how stuff comes at you nowadays. But yeah, I mean, these guys are, I think, made aware of symptoms, but then they don't do anything to kind of live optimally to begin with, right?
right.
I mean, even when I was 21 to 25, I wasn't concerned with testosterone. I mean, were you?
No, not at all. I mean,
Yeah, it
it's
wasn't a thing.
classic.
It wasn't like in the culture. It wasn't,
Right,
and there have been days where like I would have been tired or, I
sure.
was fatigued or, this, that, and the other. But I wasn't like, oh, it was definitely low testosterone,
Right,
it's
right,
just like, okay, maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night, or maybe I shouldn't have drank till 3 in the morning or,
right, right,
like that type of stuff. And unfortunately, I think that those lifestyles still exist today. And I think younger guys, for the vast majority who think they have low testosterone,
it,
don't.
right.
It's just poor lifestyle decisions
Correct.
combined with social media and, these are what these symptoms are. And then all of a sudden we're like in this amalgamation of I have low T.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the symptoms, what do you say? So if someone was questioning, like, hey, what do I'm looking for? What are the symptoms I'm looking for to see if I have low T?
Well, they vary. I would say the most popular, I shouldn't say the word popular, the most common symptom that we see is brain fog, probably by long and far,
Okay.
followed by like fatigue and or lack of progress at the gym. We get
Right.
that one a lot too. Okay, especially
Okay.
nowadays, because guys will be like, they'll be like 45 years old and they'll be like, yeah, when I was in my early 30s, I'd go to the gym and I'd be able to put it off real easy and gain some muscle and everything. And now I've been there for 6 months and I'm not getting anywhere. Like
Right.
I'm not putting on any muscle. I'm barely losing any fat. I feel stronger and I have more endurance, but like that's it. I have nothing to show for what's going on.
Right.
And so those are definitely very common complaints that we get. Falling asleep in the afternoon is, if you're hitting the coffee
Yep.
really hard in the afternoon and you're getting good sleep at night and you don't have sleep apnea, yeah,
That's
get
a sign.
evaluated for that, because
Yeah.
that's a very common thing. And then lastly, the erectile issues. Those are prominent, very prominent nowadays too.
Right.
But those are generally late. Usually you have some of these other symptoms that kind of get brushed off
Yeah.
beforehand. You don't
Yep.
think anything of it. You're like, oh, I just had a stressful day, or this, that, and the other. And
Right.
then guys don't go seek help. But then when the erectile issue hits, they're like, oh, geez, I need to go see somebody about this. I
Yeah. I
didn't think
mean,
this was going to
for
happen.
right. I mean, and for me personally, I was that's I didn't notice. Well, I was going to the gym, and I I kind of just plateaued, and I probably plateaued for 2 years, and the
Yeah.
gym kind of started to become more like work than the actual gym. Like, it used to
You
be
weren't
like
enjoying it.
I couldn't wait to go to the gym. Then it was like, and then it was very easy to blow the gym off. I was like, I'm not going today because I
Right.
just didn't have the drive. I didn't have, and it was like, it didn't seem like I was going in, and my weight kind of stayed the same or just went up a little bit.
Okay.
And it just wasn't like nothing was changing. Um, and then I was taking naps. Like on the weekends, I would take naps like crazy.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's a big big issue.
right.
Me included into that.
And then I wasn't a big coffee guy. I definitely was an energy drink guy. But then I would need another one after 12 o'clock. Like, because
Yep.
like 2 o'clock I was wiped. So if I didn't have like a Red Bull then I was like in trouble. And all of that even still going on, it still didn't click until I was listening to a podcast with, and it was either Huberman was on Rogan or Huberman was on, but whatever it was, but it was Dr. Andrew Huberman, and he mentioned about morning erections, and
Okay.
like that's what caught me, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't know if and it was like that clicked in my brain. And then
Right.
next day, I just like kept, like every day I woke up, I would like try to see if I would, and I wasn't having them.
Yep.
Then I was like, all right. So then that was the catalyst. Like I hit that and I was like, wait a second. Then I looked into it and I was like, wait, but I have all these other symptoms. But it was like that one, hearing that and then doing that, I realized, shit, I think I have, I think I have liver
Low
tape,
testosterone.
you
Yeah.
know? And then I tried, as you know, I think I told you this, but I tried to raise mine naturally. Like, because I was like, I'm going to be able to do this. And I went on the carnivore diet and I went
Yeah.
hardcore carnivore. And I said I was going to do it for 6 months. And then I went on Google and basically typed in how to raise your testosterone naturally. And
Hmm.
it said like, 8 hours of sleep, which I was getting, vitamin D, which I work outside. So I was like, okay, well, those two things were good. But then the next one was like carnivore. You want to eat like, tons of protein, carnivore.
Right.
And then the last one was lift like really heavy at the gym. So I was
Yep.
like, all right, this is what we're doing. So then I had like a revive. I was like, all right, we're going to the gym. I'm on a mission. So then I started like benching and doing just obscene amounts of weights. And I tried to do it for 6 months and I lasted like maybe four. And
Yep.
like my shoulders, my knees, my elbows, like everything was sore. I was like,
Recovery time
yeah, I was
is
just killing
long
myself,
time.
So I said, you know what, this is I'm going to get my tests checked. And well, I did get my testosterone checked. I went and paid and had it done, and my test was it was like 278 or 279. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna jack this up because you look on Google and it's like you can jack your test. I was like, this is it. It was like a goal of mine. I'm gonna do it. I'm not gonna need TRT. So at the end of the 4 months, I can like my shoulders are killing me, my knees are killing me, but at least
Right.
my testosterone is gonna be jacked. So like I figured that out, right? I go there, I get the blood work done, 289. I raised it 10 points. So I
So
was like,
I
I
think you
can't.
bring up a good talking point here, and that is, how do you raise your testosterone naturally? And the simple answer is you don't.
Right, right,
um, we get a lot of guys that are like, I want to keep my natural production, but when we were talking about earlier, what's causing low T, as a guy gets older, the Leydig cells lose efficiency, right? They aren't going to operate optimally. You don't gain that efficiency back no matter what you do. So saying like I'm going to boost my testosterone naturally is kind of, in my opinion, a misnomer.
Right,
What it should be is I'm going to optimize my lifestyle to like just live optimally, but it's not necessarily guaranteed to increase your testosterone value, right?
right.
And oftentimes what we see is in the guys that want to increase their testosterone values, because I know there's going to be people that watch this and they're going to go, well, I did that and my testosterone value went up.
Right,
And my rebuttal to that would be, what is your SHBG?
right,
So, because oftentimes what happens is when you get healthier and you stop eating sugar, a ton of it, and you eat a better diet, specifically like if you went to carnivore because it's low carb, right? It's
right.
mostly protein and fat. Okay. You're going to essentially raise your SHBG because insulin and glucose and insulin resistance and diabetes and obesity are all associated with SHBG suppression. So if you
Okay.
eliminate those factors, what's going to happen? You're going to raise your
Right,
SHBG. And if
right,
it goes up, your total testosterone will go up too. But your free testosterone is very unlikely to move very much at all, right?
right,
You might go from 300 to 450. Congratulations, you got 150 points. You
right,
probably increased your SHBG 20, 25 points and your free T like half of a point.
right, right,
So that's kind of, I think, the misnomer on increasing testosterone naturally. You do not gain back the Leydig cell inefficiency. It's
right,
permanent. Just like when women go through menopause, we don't get the ovaries back. They're done,
right,
right? Same with the Leydig cell dysfunction. When they lose efficiency, they're losing efficiency. You do not gain that back.
right. And then so with that too, like the testosterone boosters that you see, these
Right.
supplements that you buy and you can do. I've taken them myself and they didn't work. I mean, is
Right.
that
They don't do any.
they
No,
don't
they
work,
don't
right?
do anything at all. I think
Okay.
there was a study on, I want to say it was Shilajit or ashwagandha, one of those, that
Yeah,
they did a study where it showed that it increased your total testosterone 100 points.
right,
Okay. Well, what's the SHBG to go along with it?
right.
There isn't any, right? Because that's super important. I'm sure we'll talk about SHBG in another
Yeah.
episode. So at least people can understand a little bit more
Yeah,
of what
but
it is and
you
why
know
it's
what? I
important.
mean, now that we bring it up though, Josh, it's important because you bring up a good point because it is the total T is something that is people are just fixated on,
Yeah.
and it is important as you and I. I mean, listen, when I thought that that was the only thing that mattered. I thought the
Right.
total T meant that you were, and that's what. And I came from a clinic that, I mean, you know this. I came from a clinic that went basically off of the total T. They printed it out and it went off of the numbers, and it was total T was high, total T was low. That's what we were doing. It wasn't until you and I connected that there was SHBG, free T,
Yeah.
all these other things. So total T is important, but it's just a piece of the puzzle.
I had a gentleman today who's did his evaluation and his total testosterone was 610 naturally. And
Right,
you're like, and this gentleman's almost 50 years old,
right.
right? And you're like, well, hot dang, like
That's
that's
pretty
a
good.
really good, it's a
Yeah,
pretty good value to come in with, right? And
sure.
you're gonna go to your family doctor or your urologist or whatever, and they're gonna look at that and they're gonna go, dude, your testosterone level is awesome. Like you
Yeah,
don't need TRT, right? And meanwhile, this guy's like, I can't stay awake after work. I'm tired. I have no gains in the gym. My erections suck, the whole 9 yards. And they're telling you that you're fine, that your levels, it's not your testosterone. It's got to be something else. So maybe they check your thyroid, which doesn't cause erectile dysfunction, but they're gonna check all these things and they're probably going to be normal.
yeah.
Okay. So now you think you're just crazy, right? That something's not right. And you've gone everywhere and it's completely normal. So this guy comes to me, testosterone value 610, and his SHBG was 77, which is high. Um,
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? High SHBG is actually, a marker of health. This guy was very healthy. He liked to run 3 times a week. He was on the bike. He did lift weights, but had virtually no progress. His endurance got better. His strength got marginally better, but he has no progress to show for it other than those things. His free testosterone was 6.8.
Mm.
So, which
Single
is
digit.
low. right? It's pretty 6.8 nanograms per deciliter or 68 picograms per milliliter, right? Low. That's why he has symptoms. This man has primary hypogonadism. The reason his testosterone is 610 is because his SHBG is 77.
Right.
Okay. And that's what I think people need to understand is it's not just looking at that number and going, oh, that's great. You need an evaluation and somebody that understands how this is all going to work, um, in terms of figuring that out for somebody because like for you, for example, you're a contractor. Like you don't
Yeah.
do this for a living. I do this for a living. So
Right.
people come to me for that help. Now, if I want a house built, I'm going to come to you
Right.
because
Right.
I don't know how to build a house.
Exactly.
Everybody has their own expertise. So the problem is in this space, because I think there's money involved and
Right.
it's of a lower dollar value. I mean, obviously, building a house is a lot more money, but you still have it in your industry too, where people try to get things for cheaper, right? I think you have clinics that are a little disingenuous with
Right.
their offerings and their knowledge base isn't up to par. And so I think people can be misled. And I feel because of that those clinics exist, they kind of ruin it all for all of us,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
now I get a bad rap, even though I'm trying to do the right thing and go about it the right way. I get a bad rap because XYZ clinic down the road just wants your money.
Yeah.
And they don't really care about doing a thorough evaluation. They just check your total T. They don't check SHBG or really dive into anything. They're just like, here, take this, see you later.
Yeah.
Much like the clinic that you came from in a way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I
So
think so. I think that starting with testosterone like we did is important. Because I think like we talked about, we're going to dive into the rest of this stuff because uh, total testosterone, just testosterone, is just a piece of the puzzle. I was misguided I thought total T was it. I thought that,
right. A lot of
so,
guys do. I mean, we are in our TikTok chat, man. How many
yeah,
people were flashing
exactly.
their totals out there like a badge of
Exactly.
honor?
So that's why I thought this was a good idea if we break this into 5 parts and we break it so that, the next 4 parts that we're going to talk about are just as essential as
Right.
testosterone. But I figure start with testosterone. This is the bread and butter. This is what everyone comes
Yeah.
for. Let's see what it is. You know what I mean? So I think that we're going to be running out of time here in a little bit
All
here.
right.
So, but I think that's a good start for our 5 part series, and then I think we're going to do estrogen next.
Oh boy.
So our favorite
My
topic in
favorite.
estrogen is going to be aromatase inhibitors.
My favorite.
Yeah. So, hey, Josh, real quick, if anyone wanted to find you, where would you like to direct them towards?
So they could go to our website, which is virtusmenshealth.com. That will be changing in the coming month, I would say, to virtushealthoptimization.com. Because I'm expanding my clinic beyond men's health. I hired another nurse practitioner to do women's hormones and the person I hired, um, we could probably get her on the podcast at some point in
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Um, Dana is her name, and she's been doing women's hormones for quite some time, and she's very progressive and very knowledgeable. And I'm happy to have her on board. So we are rebranding, so to speak, to
Right.
include the fact that we do the women's hormones as well.
Yes.
But as of right now, virtusmenshealth.com, and probably sometime in February, virtushealthoptimization.com.
Okay. And we'll put it in the description too with all of your
Yeah, definitely. And
information. But
it'll
yeah,
be in the link in my bio on TikTok and all our socials too. So if
so
you,
my
you know,
wife gets HRT from her now, so she will
perfect.
eventually become, so both of us will be under the same umbrella.
Be under the same
And when is
umbrella.
she going to be coming aboard, Josh?
She starts at our clinic officially March 17th, but we'll probably have a few things sprinkled in there
March
beforehand. But
17th.
March 17th is the go
That's
live
St.
date.
Patrick's Day?
It may be.
Yeah,
I
St.
think it
Patrick's
is
Day.
actually.
There you go. Perfect.
Maybe it'll be our lucky day.
It may be a lucky day. That's exactly right. All right, Josh. Well, listen, I'm going to click off of this one. Did you have time to do another one tonight?
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right.
Let's rip
I'll
through another
shut
one
this
tonight.
down and then I'll send you another one and
Cool.
we'll
Sounds
jump
good.
into the estrogen
Oh
level.
boy,
All
my
right.
fave.
All right.
Sounds good,
Thank you,
man.
Josh.
Yep. See you, brother.
Take care.